Have you ever heard stories about Russia that sounded cold or confusing, but you knew deep down there had to be something more behind it? Maybe you've seen pictures of snowy cities, serious faces, and strange letters you couldn't understand, but you still wanted to know what life there is really like. Behind those first impressions, Russia is a place full of color, music, kindness, and powerful emotions that most people never get to see. In this video, we'll explore the real Russia through simple English that's easy to follow, so you can learn both language and culture together. You'll travel with us across icy lakes, modern cities, small villages, and old traditions that are still alive today in everyday life. We'll answer questions like why Russia is so big, what people eat and believe, and why this country feels so mysterious even in today's world. If you've ever been curious about Russia but felt unsure where to begin, this story will guide you step by step with clear words and real examples. By the end, you won't just understand more about Russia. You'll also understand more English in a fun and natural way that feels like a journey. So, if you're ready to learn and explore at the same time, let's begin our adventure together and see what makes Russia so unique and unforgettable. Russia, a land like no other. Russia is the biggest country in the world, covering more land than any other nation on Earth, with over 17 million square kilometers from west to east. It stretches across 2 continents, Europe and Asia, and touches more than a dozen countries including China, Mongolia, Finland, and Norway. Because Russia is so wide, it crosses 11 time zones, which means when people in the West are eating breakfast, people in the East are already going to bed. That's like having sunrise and sunset in different parts of the same country at completely different times, a daily reminder of just how massive it truly is. If you placed all of Australia, India, and most of Europe inside Russia, you'd still have space left over for another country or two. But size is only the beginning of Russia's story. The land itself is full of stunning places that feel like different worlds, depending on where you go. In the West, you'll see flat green plains, deep rivers like the Volga, and cities full of culture and history where millions of people live and work every day. In the North, you'll find icy oceans, frozen forests, and places where the sun disappears in winter and never sets in summer, a land of light and shadow. Down south, you'll see warm beaches along the Black Sea, beautiful mountains in the Caucasus, and fields that grow fruits, grains, and flowers. And in the Far East, volcanoes, waterfalls, wild animals, and dense forests that stretch for miles without a single road, house, or phone signal. To really understand how big and wild Russia is, imagine taking a train that runs all the way from Moscow in the west to Vladivostok in the far east. This train is called the Trans-Siberian Railway, and it travels over 9,000 kilometers across the entire country, the longest railway journey in the world. If you stayed on the train from beginning to end, it would take you more than 7 days, with stops in dozens of cities, towns, and villages along the way. As the train moves east, the views outside the window change from tall buildings and traffic lights to snowy hills, dark forests, and quiet rivers. One of the most famous stops along this route is Lake Baikal, a place that's not just beautiful, but also full of mystery and wonder. Lake Baikal is the deepest freshwater lake on the planet, and it holds about 20% of all the unfrozen freshwater found on Earth. In winter, the lake freezes so hard that cars and trucks can drive across it, while in summer, the water is crystal clear and shines with deep blue and green colors. Local people believe the lake is alive. They say it breathes, it sings, and it even has a spirit that protects the water and all the animals inside it. Now let's talk about Siberia, a name that often sounds cold and scary. But in reality, it's a peaceful land where millions of people live close to nature. Siberia is covered in forests called taiga, and in winter, temperatures can fall to -40 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze your eyelashes. But people still live there, raise families, work, and find ways to stay warm, with wooden houses, fur coats, hot soup, and thick blankets of snow outside. You'll also find animals like bears, wolves, reindeer, and owls living freely in the wild, far away from cities and noise, just like in old fairy tales. At the same time, Russia has some of the world's biggest and busiest cities, full of lights, art, music, and fast-moving trains underground, called metro. Moscow, the capital, is home to over 12 million people, with grand buildings like the Kremlin and colorful churches like St. Basil's Cathedral in Red Square. St. Petersburg, once called Leningrad, is known for its canals, palaces, and art, often called the Venice of the North, because of its beauty and bridges. So, from icy lakes to golden domes, and from wild animals to busy street markets, Russia is not just one land, it's many worlds in one country. It's a place where history and nature live side by side, where old traditions meet modern life, and where every part of the land tells its own unique story. In the next part, we'll leave the mountains and forests and step into the homes and hearts of the people who live across this vast and beautiful land. Meet the people. What are Russians really like? Many people wonder this question, especially when they hear that Russians don't smile much in public. But the truth is more interesting, more human, and full of surprises, just like the people themselves. In Russia, people often seem serious when you first meet them, especially in the streets, stores, or on the train. That's because, in Russian culture, smiling without a reason can feel strange or even fake, especially with strangers. But don't let the serious faces fool you. Once you enter their home, everything changes. Hospitality in Russia is a big deal. When you visit someone's house, even for the first time, they will treat you like family. You'll be offered hot tea, homemade food, and maybe even asked to stay the night if it gets too late or too cold outside. One cup of tea is never enough. They'll keep filling it until you can't drink anymore. And the food? It's not just something to eat. It's how they show love, care, and respect. You'll try dishes like borscht, a beetroot soup with sour cream, blini, which are thin pancakes, and pelmeni, small meat dumplings boiled in hot water. If there's a grandmother in the house, called babushka, she will be the queen of the kitchen. Babushkas are strong, wise, and kind, but they don't take no for an answer when it comes to eating. If she tells you to eat more, you eat more, and say thank you afterward, even if you're full. Russians are known for being strong, quiet, and proud. Many of them believe in something called the Russian soul, a deep feeling of love, sadness, music, and poetry all mixed together. It's not easy to explain in words, but when you hear Russian music or read Russian poems, you'll start to feel it too. Many Russians love art, music, and nature. Even in small homes, you'll often find shelves full of books, photos of forests, and old paintings passed down from family to family. They enjoy talking about big ideas, like love, death, freedom, and fate, especially late at night with friends and candles and maybe a little wine. They also believe in deep friendship. In Russia, a true friend is someone who will help you without asking why, even if you call them at 3 a.m. And if you need support, they'll show up with warm clothes, food, and time. No questions, just care. But life is not always easy for them. Long winters, difficult jobs, and hard times have made many Russians tough and realistic. They don't complain much, but they don't pretend everything is perfect either. Instead, they laugh at problems, tell dark jokes, and carry on with quiet strength. At the same time, young people in Russia are changing fast. They study languages, use social media, travel when they can, and follow trends from around the world. But they also keep their traditions, like family dinners, New Year celebrations, and walking in parks on Sundays. So, what are Russians really like? They are kind but private, strong but emotional, cold on the outside, but often very warm on the inside. They may not smile first, but they will remember your name, your story, and how you made them feel. In the next part, we'll explore how Russia's extreme seasons, from burning summers to freezing winters, shape the way people live, eat, dress, and survive every day. Let's step into the cold and discover the beauty in the frost. The cold and the warm. Russia is a land of extremes, not just in size or culture, but also in temperature, with winters that can freeze rivers and summers that can burn your skin. In the city of Yakutsk, for example, winter temperatures often drop below -40 degrees Celsius, making it one of the coldest places where people live. Imagine going outside and feeling your nose freeze in seconds, your eyelashes turning into ice, and the air so cold it feels like glass in your lungs. Children still go to school in this weather, wrapped in layers of wool and fur, wearing heavy boots and thick hats that cover almost every part of their face. At home, families keep the heaters on all day, drink hot tea nonstop, and sleep under mountains of blankets to stay warm and safe during the long, dark nights. In big cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, winter means snow-covered streets, frozen rivers, and people walking fast with their hands deep in their pockets. But it also means beauty. Buildings glowing with lights, parks turned into ice skating rinks, and steam rising from cups of tea in quiet cafes. And then, there's summer. Yes, Russia has summer too. And when it arrives, people rush outside to enjoy every moment of sunshine. In the south, temperatures can reach 30 degrees Celsius or higher, and people wear light clothes, eat ice cream, and spend hours at the beach or lake. In the countryside, children run through fields of flowers, families cook outside on wood fires, and birds sing loudly from morning until night. But no matter the season, Russians have one powerful tradition that helps them survive both the cold and the stress of life. It's called the banya. A banya is a hot steam room, similar to a sauna, where people sit in thick heat until they're sweating like crazy, and then jump into the snow or cold water. It sounds extreme, but they believe it cleans the body, relaxes the mind, and makes you stronger, and they do it regularly, sometimes even once a week. Inside the banya, friends talk, laugh, hit each other lightly with tree branches called venik, and let the heat melt away the worries of the week. Food also changes with the seasons. In winter, people eat heavy dishes like soups, meat, and potatoes, while in summer, they enjoy fresh berries, salads, and cold drinks. And no matter what time of year it is, Russians love tea, not just as a drink, but as a moment to rest, think, and connect with others. So, whether the streets are covered in snow or full of sunshine, Russian life is shaped by nature, and people find ways to live with it, not fight it. They dress smart, plan ahead, stay close to family, and respect the power of the weather. Because in Russia, nature is never far away from daily life. In the next part, we'll dive into something that sounds difficult but is full of beauty: the Russian language, how it works, and how it feels to hear it for the first time. The language that sounds like a code. To many people around the world, the Russian language sounds strong, mysterious, and sometimes even a little scary, like a secret code from a spy movie. It's full of sharp sounds, rolling R's, and long words that seem impossible to read unless you know the special alphabet used in Russia. That alphabet is called Cyrillic, and it looks very different from the English one. But here's the surprise: it's not as hard as it seems at first. The Cyrillic alphabet has 33 letters, and many of them actually sound similar to English letters. So once you learn the shapes, things get easier quickly. For example, the letter that looks like B is pronounced like a V. The letter that looks like P is actually an R, and the letter H is pronounced like N. It might feel confusing in the beginning, but with practice, your brain starts to see the patterns and the puzzle becomes a picture, clear and fun to solve. Now, let's try some simple Russian words that beginners often learn first. And don't worry, you don't need to be perfect to enjoy the sound and rhythm. Da means yes, and niet means no. Two words that are short, sharp, and easy to remember when speaking with someone in Russian. Privet means hi. It's casual and friendly, something you'd say to a friend, while zdravstvuyte is the more formal version used for strangers or older people. Spasibo means thank you, and it's one of the most useful and polite words you can learn in any language, especially in Russia where good manners matter. Pожалуйста means please, or you're welcome, depending on the context, and it shows kindness, which Russians appreciate even if they don't always show it on their face. When you hear Russian for the first time, it might feel fast, serious, or even a bit cold. But that's just the sound, not the feeling behind the words. In truth, Russian is a very emotional language, full of poetic expressions, deep meanings, and rich history that goes back hundreds of years. Poets like Pushkin, writers like Dostoevsky, and musicians like Tchaikovsky all used this language to express pain, beauty, love, and life in powerful ways. Even everyday people speak with color, using metaphors, strong sayings, and deep voices that carry the weight of stories, memories, and dreams. And here's something interesting. Russians don't just speak the language, they also feel it, sometimes using silence to say more than words ever could. In fact, silence in Russia is not uncomfortable. It can mean agreement, respect, or simply a quiet space to think before continuing the conversation. That's why learning Russian is more than just grammar or vocabulary. It's about understanding the feeling behind the words, the music in the sound. You don't need to be fluent to appreciate it. Just hearing a Russian song, reading a few short poems, or saying thank you with a smile is already a beginning. So if the language once felt like a wall, now maybe it feels like a door. And one day, you might step through that door and see the beauty inside. In the next part, we'll explore Russia's deep love for stories, fairy tales, legends, and true heroes that live in the hearts of people, from children to grandparents. A country full of stories. In Russia, stories are everywhere. Not just in books or movies, but in songs, dances, paintings, and even in the way people speak to each other every day. From the time children are young, they grow up hearing fairy tales about magical animals, brave heroes, clever girls, and powerful grandmothers with wild secrets. One of the most famous characters in Russian folklore is Baba Yaga, a strange old woman who flies in a giant mortar and lives in a house that stands on chicken legs. She's not fully evil or good. Sometimes she helps the hero, sometimes she tricks them. But she always teaches a lesson, which makes her unforgettable. Then there's the Firebird, a glowing, magical bird with golden feathers, who appears in many tales as a symbol of light, danger, and dreams that come true with courage. You'll also hear about Koschei the Deathless, an ancient villain whose soul is hidden inside a needle, inside an egg, inside a duck, inside a rabbit, deep within a chest. These stories are not just for fun. They teach lessons about kindness, bravery, cleverness, and how to face fear with heart and hope, no matter who you are. Even adults in Russia love these tales. They remember them from childhood, share them with their children, and feel proud of their deep roots in imagination and wisdom. But the stories don't stop with fairy tales. Russia is also the birthplace of many great writers, poets, scientists, dancers, and space explorers who changed the world. Leo Tolstoy, the author of War and Peace, wrote long books about love, war, and family that still touch people's hearts more than 100 years later. Fyodor Dostoevsky explored the darkest corners of the human mind in stories like Crime and Punishment, where even the worst choices can lead to deep questions about life. Anton Chekhov, a master of short stories and plays, showed how quiet moments and simple words can reveal the biggest emotions: sadness, love, loneliness, and hope. In music, Russia gave us to Tchaikovsky, whose Swan Lake and Nutcracker are known all over the world, filling stages with beauty, drama, and feeling. In ballet, Russian dancers became legends, moving with such grace and power that people cried just watching their silent stories on stage. And in science and space, Russia became the first country to send a human, Yuri Gagarin, into orbit, starting a whole new chapter of dreams beyond Earth. These are not just facts. They're living stories that Russians still feel proud of, and they tell them again and again with passion in their voice. In schools, children learn about writers and astronauts, but also about their own family stories: how grandparents survived wars, built homes, or saved each other in hard times. Because in Russia, stories are more than entertainment. They are memory, identity, and proof that even in the hardest winters, the human spirit can still shine. Every person in Russia has a story to tell. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear stories about love, loss, survival, hope, and the small joys that make life beautiful. In the next part, we'll leave the past for a moment and see how modern Russia looks today, how people live now, what they do for fun, and what the future might hold. Modern life in Russia. Today's Russia is a mix of old and new, where ancient churches stand next to shopping malls, and young people scroll on smartphones while riding trains built 50 years ago. In big cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, life moves fast. People work long hours, take the metro, meet friends at cafes, and enjoy art, fashion, and music. You'll see teenagers filming dance videos on TikTok, business people walking with coffee in one hand and phone in the other, and grandmothers selling flowers by the subway entrance. Modern Russians enjoy movies, concerts, gyms, and online shopping, just like people in many other countries. But they also keep many of their old traditions alive. On weekends, families might visit their dacha, a small country house outside the city, where they plant vegetables, pick berries, and relax with fresh air and quiet sounds. Some grow cucumbers and tomatoes, others chop wood for the fire, and at night they cook outside, tell stories, and look at the stars while drinking hot tea with lemon. In smaller towns and villages, life is simpler and slower. People walk instead of drive, buy fresh bread from the local bakery, and know almost everyone in the neighborhood. Children play in the snow in winter or ride bikes in summer, and older people sit on benches, chat about the weather, and feed birds in the park. The difference between city and village life in Russia is big, but both have something special. One is full of energy, the other full of peace and tradition. Many young people dream of studying abroad or working in Europe or America, but many also return home because they miss the language, the food, and their family. And speaking of food, fast food like burgers and pizza are popular now, but traditional Russian dishes are still loved. Warm soups, fresh salads, and homemade cakes never go out of style. Even the holidays bring old and new together. Russians celebrate New Year with fireworks and champagne, but also eat Olivier salad and watch the same classic movie every year. At school, children study hard, subjects like math, science, and English, and they often go to music lessons, sports clubs, or chess classes after school. Many students take pride in knowing poems by heart, writing neat cursive letters, and solving difficult math problems that feel like puzzles from another time. Technology is growing fast in Russia. People use apps to pay for things, order food, and even call a taxi with just one click, just like in New York or London. At the same time, Russian culture still values quiet, deep thinking. reading books, listening to classical music, and spending hours talking about life with close friends. Politics and news can be heavy sometimes, and people don't always say what they think out loud. But in private, they have strong opinions and deep feelings. What's most interesting is that many Russians feel both modern and traditional at the same time. They watch Korean dramas, but also reread old Russian novels before bed. They use social media, but they still believe in face-to-face conversations, long walks, and sitting together in the kitchen talking until midnight. Modern life in Russia is changing quickly, but the heart of the people remains proud, quiet, emotional, and full of stories they carry wherever they go. In the next part, we'll explore the problems and challenges Russia faces today, the things you don't often see in travel videos or tourist guides, but that are real and important. The challenges behind the beauty. Russia may look strong, calm, and proud from the outside, but like any country, it also faces deep problems that affect people's everyday lives in quiet and serious ways. One of the biggest challenges is the weather. Long winters can be hard on health, mental well-being, and the economy, especially in rural areas where heating is expensive. In remote villages, people sometimes go days without seeing a doctor, a bus, or even a working internet connection, which makes modern life more difficult to reach. While cities grow fast and offer more jobs, many small towns are shrinking. Young people move away, old schools close, and streets become quieter each year. Another challenge is money. In some areas, people earn very little, but still need to pay for food, clothes, and medicine that often cost the same as in big cities. Even though Russia has rich resources like oil, gas, and minerals, not everyone feels the benefits, and economic gaps between rich and poor can be wide and unfair. Healthcare and education are free in theory, but in reality, some hospitals don't have enough equipment or doctors, and some schools struggle with old books and cold classrooms. Corruption, or the unfair use of power for personal gain, is also a problem that many Russians talk about in private, though it is not always easy to solve or even speak about openly. And then there's politics, a topic that many Russians approach carefully, often avoiding big opinions in public to stay safe and protect their families. The news on television is not always trusted, and people sometimes turn to Telegram, YouTube, or independent websites to hear different voices and understand what's really happening. Internationally, Russia's image is often shaped by headlines, conflict, and politics, which can lead to misunderstandings between people who have never met face to face. Because of this, some Russians feel that the world doesn't truly see them. They feel judged, feared, or ignored, even though they just want peace, respect, and connection like anyone else. Travel has also become more difficult. Due to global tensions and visa issues, many Russians find it hard to visit other countries or meet people from different cultures. This can create a feeling of isolation, like being locked in a beautiful house with deep history, but not being allowed to visit the neighbors or make new friends. And for young people, the future feels unclear. They dream of freedom, adventure, and success, but worry about the limits around them, the economy, and the decisions made far above their heads. But even with all these challenges, the people keep going. They adapt, survive, support each other, and find ways to smile, laugh, and move forward, even in the hardest times. Because deep inside, many Russians carry a quiet power, the belief that no matter how cold the winter or hard the road, life will go on, and they will get through it together. In the next part, we'll discover how these struggles shape Russian hearts and minds, and what the world can learn from the strength, silence, and spirit of its people. The strength in silence. In Russia, silence is not always empty. It speaks. Sometimes it says more than 100 words ever could. In fact, many Russians believe that silence shows wisdom, respect, and strength. And when they do speak, their words often carry deep meaning, honesty, and heart. This quiet strength comes from history. Years of war, cold winters, hard work, and surviving through impossible times. It also comes from culture. Stories, songs, and habits passed down from grandparents who knew how to endure without complaining. Many Russians learn from a young age that life can be tough. So they grow up strong, realistic, and prepared to face problems without fear or drama. But strength doesn't mean coldness. It means being able to keep going when things get hard. When someone loses a job, they don't cry in public. They say, "It's life," then look for new work and move on. When the weather drops to -20, they still go to school, cook dinner, and shovel snow with quiet patience. When the news is heavy or confusing, they drink tea, share a joke, and talk about life with trusted friends. And through it all, they find ways to smile. Not with big happy faces, but with small kindnesses. A warm meal for a guest, a seat offered on a bus, or a neighbor clearing your snow without asking for thanks. Music also carries the spirit. From deep classical sounds to quiet folk songs sung around a fire or at home, there's emotion in every note, even if the singer barely moves or smiles. In the silence between the sounds, there's beauty, strength, and feeling. Art and poetry are also part of this soul. Russians love language, not just for talking, but for feeling. They write about the forest, the wind, the stars, and the heart, not to impress others, but to understand life. In many homes, you'll still find books of poetry, photos of family in black and white, and soft lights that make space for thinking. Even in big cities, this quiet culture remains, a deep respect for thought, reflection, and emotional truth. Many foreigners are surprised by how calm and deep conversations feel in Russia, even between people who just met. Because in Russia, being loud is not always better. Sometimes being silent means listening, caring, or holding space for someone else's pain or joy. And this is something the world can learn, that not all power is loud, and not all love is loud either. So, when you walk the snowy streets of Russia, don't be fooled by quiet faces or short answers. Behind them, there are oceans of feeling, mountains of memory, and fires of hope that burn quietly and deeply. In the next part, we'll bring everything together, from the land and language to the people and problems, and understand what makes Russia unforgettable in a way no words can fully explain. Russia, a feeling, not just a place. By now, you've seen many sides of Russia. The wide frozen lands, the busy cities, the warm homes, and the quiet strength of its people. You've heard about the cold winters and hot summers, the banya and the tea, the poems and the silence, the beauty and the struggle. But the truth is, Russia is not just a country you can describe with facts, maps, or news reports. It's a feeling. It's the feeling of standing in the snow while church bells ring in the distance and steam rises from your breath. It's the sound of an old folk song playing on a dusty radio while a grandmother slices bread and tells you a story from her youth. It's the kindness of a stranger helping you on the street, not with a big smile, but with real care and no words needed. It's the fire of a young student writing poems about love and war, sitting alone in a small room with a single light bulb above. It's the strength of a worker in a village far away from the city, waking up at 6 to chop wood, feed animals, and prepare soup for the family. It's the hope of a child learning their first English words, dreaming of a world beyond the horizon, but still proud of their roots in the frozen soil. Russia is a land of opposites, cold and warm, loud and quiet, soft and strong, broken and beautiful all at once. And maybe that's why it stays in people's hearts long after they visit, or even if they never go, because it touches something deeper inside. Not everyone will understand Russia, and that's okay. Because Russia doesn't need to be understood fully. It needs to be listened to, felt, and respected, like a song in a language you don't speak, but somehow still makes you cry. So, if you followed this journey from beginning to end, you haven't just learned about Russia. You've learned how to see a place through story, through emotion, and through simple English that opens the world one word at a time. In the final part, we'll wrap up this story and leave you with one last thought, something you'll remember every time you see a snowy photo or hear the word Russia. So, what have we discovered together in this journey through Russia, told in slow, clear English for curious minds around the world? We've learned that Russia is more than just a country. It's a world of its own, filled with frozen lakes, deep forests, golden palaces, and simple wooden homes. We've seen that behind serious faces, there are warm hearts, behind quiet words, there are strong emotions, and behind every snowstorm, there's a fire still burning inside. We explored Russian cities full of light and movement, and quiet villages where time moves slowly and every neighbor knows your name. We met the people, strong, proud, and poetic, who face hard winters, big problems, and deep feelings with quiet smiles and steady hands. We tasted their food, listened to their music, stepped into their banyas, and sat with them over tea to hear stories from the past and dreams for the future. We spoke their words, simple ones like da, spasibo, and privet, and saw that even in another language, connection is always possible. And we saw that even though Russia has challenges, pain, and a complicated history, it also holds beauty, kindness, and stories that stay with you forever. In learning about Russia, you've also learned how to listen, how to feel through language, and how to use English to understand not just words, but people. Thank you for watching this far and learning with an open heart. If you enjoyed this journey through the heart of Russia and learned something new in simple, real English, there's more waiting for you. Subscribe now to keep learning English through powerful stories from around the world, one country, one culture, and one conversation at a time.